Welcome to Module 5 on STPF. We've gotten a lot of interest on this. I think it'll be really exciting, and we have a lot of great speakers today who have been fellows in different settings, and really grateful to have Cynthia here as well.
All right, next we have Stephanie Bailey, who is an assistant professor of physics at Chapman University and is a former AAAS fellow in the diplomacy program. So Stephanie, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you again, Harinder and Adriana, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. First, I just want to give you a little introduction about myself. I am an assistant professor of physics at Chapman University in Southern California. I earned my PhD in experimental nuclear physics from the College of William and Mary, and that's in Virginia. And then I spent several years as a postdoc and a researcher at Stanford in the departments of radiology and health outcomes, building microsimulation models of disease outcomes at the population level. And then I was a AAAS Science and Tech Policy Fellow in 2014 and 2015, and specifically my placement was in the LGBTI office at the U.S. Agency for International Development, based both in Washington, D.C. and Managua, Nicaragua. As you've learned, there are many great advantages and benefits of this fellowship. For me, the primary three are the following. First, the fellowship, it gave me the opportunity to explore a career in the federal government without actually committing to a permanent position. So again, the fellowship is temporary. It's 1 or 2 years, depending upon your placement. I'm also really grateful for the opportunity that the fellowship gave me to work abroad. Again, I spent a couple of months in the capital of Nicaragua, as well as Bluefields, which was a very, very rural town. So I got to see both sides of the country. And then thirdly, upon completing the fellowship, every fellow becomes a part of this large network of alums. And currently, I think we're at about 3,500 alums, and I've reached out a number of times asking for help, and alums are more than happy to give their assistance. Some things to consider as you're applying or thinking about this fellowship. And the first one is the size. As you saw from the picture that was presented at the very beginning, the fellowship classes tend to be several hundreds of scientists and engineers. And I think our class was probably over 200. And for me, that was definitely outside of my comfort zone. I did feel lost. I felt like a number. It was hard for me to build connections and maintain those connections. Also, as a grad student and as an independent researcher in academia, I'd come to appreciate a lot of independence. And so switching over to the fellowship was a big difference in that respect for me. There was a lot of structure, a lot of checking in and checking out, and tracking my movements and reporting to others and getting permission. And again, for me, that was a big challenge because I hadn't had to do those things for many, many years. Also, some other almost silly considerations, but they had a big effect on me. You are going to be moving to Washington, D.C., and the weather in the winter gets cold, and in the summer it gets very hot and humid. And Washington, D.C. is a big city, and that likely means living in an apartment or a high-rise building and utilizing public transportation. And again, for me, all of those things were a lot more difficult than for most. I've been living in the mountains, a mountain community in the canyons for the last several years, and I'm definitely a country girl at heart. Some advice, if you are accepted into the program, my biggest piece of advice is to prioritize your placement or to select a mentor who is a formal AAAS fellow, or at least a scientist, to make sure or to ensure that your mentor in your office understand and know your skills and abilities and what you're capable of doing. Also to make sure that your work is policy relevant, to make sure that your work is appropriate to your interest and your level, and also to make sure that the work is challenging. And finally, to set realistic expectations. And I don't think I did that myself as a fellow. You'll read as you're looking at advertisements for the fellowship that it's a monumental, life-changing, outstanding experience. And for many fellows, that rings true. And in fact, you're going to hear from Benjamin shortly, and it sounds like he's having a really amazing experience. But for me, I think it was more common and a more normal experience. I wouldn't say it was monumental in that respect. Again, I'm incredibly grateful for the experience. Again, there are these things to think about as you're going through that application and interviewing process. That is it for me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate you sharing some of the challenges, because I've definitely felt some of those as well. And it's very easy for us to talk about these fellowships and a lot of experiences in these glowing terms, because they are really great experiences, but they obviously do come with challenges, especially this year. So thank you for that.